Welcome to Professor Game Podcast, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking, who brings the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I teach and work at IE Business School in Madrid, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Want to know more? Go to professorgame.com/subscribe, start on our email list, and ask me anything. Engagers, today we have Kerstin Oberprieler. So Kerstin, the first thing is, before I ask you if you're prepared to engage, did I pronounce your last name decently?
Yes and yes.
Let's do this. So, good last name. She's prepared to engage. We are ready to go because Kerstin is an award-winning gamification designer and co-founder of PentaQuest. She's also studying her Ph.D. in gamification. As a leading gamification academic and practitioner, Kerstin is pushing the boundaries of what is possible with gamification, building gamified solutions that are intuitive, highly effective, and of course, engaging. Her recent clients include private businesses, government, non-for-profit organizations, and schools, and all are seeking to engage employees, learners through gamification. Her experience includes card games, board games, digital games, and team and workplace-based gamification experiences and platforms. So she's a sought-after speaker, as we know, and is known for her engaging and energetic style, which I can attest to, because Kerstin has presented all over Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Germany, and the US, and also we met in Chicago, so that must be one of the speeches that she's given in the US. And she has also had a speech at the TEDx Canberra about the future of gamification, which you can find in the show notes. So Kerstin, is there anything from that fantastic curriculum that we are missing?
No, I think that's a very good intro.
It covers it all, and that's great. We met in Chicago in GamiCon last year, and it was a fantastic occasion to meet Kerstin because she had a great speech. She was also going for the awards, and she had a fantastic project that she presented. So Kerstin, we would like to know, the first thing that we like to know of our guests is, what you could call a regular day with Kerstin look like? What does being Kerstin in a life today look like?
Well, my days are quite diverse, so it really depends on the clients and the projects that I have on that day. So some days it means working closely with my clients to develop bespoke gamification experiences for their staff, their clients, or their citizens. Sometimes it's working in the office with my team to improve our SaaS product and design new features. And some days it's just full of meetings with potential clients and people that are interested in gamification, which sometimes includes traveling all over Australia or doing presentations or workshops. So it's quite different every day, and that variety is great.
And traveling all over Australia, it's not a small thing. I mean, Australia is a large country, so that implies a big amount of travel, right?
Yes, it is quite big. I saw a map the other day, which was just how much of Europe Australia actually covers. So yes, Australia is quite large.
Absolutely. So now that we know what your regular days look like, after hearing all the fantastic things that you're doing, the awards, the speeches that you've given, we also like to know of a time when it didn't go as well, and talk to us about that time which you would call perhaps your favorite fail or first attempt in learning. And what did you learn from it? How did you come out? Like, give us the whole story. We want to be there with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this is a great question. So a failure, or we call it learning at PentaQuest. So a failure or a learning that we've had it. One was last year when we were rolling out a gamification experience to a large company. So the backstory is that we've been working closely with them, with the client team, to design and implement a digital gamification experience for their staff. And they had a lot of changes to their business and their team structure. So actually, we got a whole new project team on their side. So the clients and the client team we've been working with for many months all got changed around, and all of a sudden we had a brand new team. So that new team had received only a short handover, so they really weren't caught up with what we were doing. And on top of that, we had about 2 weeks before we were rolling out this gamified experience. So not only do we had to re-educate the whole client team, but we're also we'd been preparing for this rollout for a couple of weeks and months. So the rollout then felt quite rushed, and the employees actually didn't receive adequate communication from the client. So the very first day of rollout, we were doing some training and demos and things like that, and we got some negative reactions from staff who'd felt that a new platform and a new system had been sprung on them. So this negatively tainted some of their views of the gamification experience. So the rollout was successful in the end, and we got some really fantastic results, but it was quite hard for our designers and our team, and it definitely wasn't ideal for our client or for the users. So because of this learning, we're now like a lot more aware of having multiple people in our client organization who own the gamification intervention, and so that if one person leaves, it doesn't jeopardize the whole process or the whole project. So now, because of this, we insist with our clients that there is adequate time to onboard and communicate with their staff, and so we've made that part of our process and going forward, and we found that extra time to onboard and implement has made the whole process much smoother and much better.
Communication, which is a fundamental thing in any project that you go through, let alone gamification, I think it would be, for me at least, from listening to that story, would be one of the main learnings that you got, that I get from your story. Is there anything else that you would like to point out from that story that we should take away from that, Kerstin?
Well, I think it's two things. Like you said, it's the communication and giving people enough time to prepare for what is a new experience for most people. So the recipients of the gamification experience need to be aware of what's happening, why it's, what are the expectations and things like that. And then the second thing is probably, again, our takeaway is making sure that when we work with clients, that there's multiple points of contact in the organization.
That's great. Actually makes a lot of sense. That way you're not just counting on that one person, which was the problem that you had, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic. So in that same line of facing challenges and solving them using gamification, what would you say, Kerstin, has been the biggest challenge, or maybe one of the biggest challenges that you've faced and actually solved using gamification and all these techniques that we've been talking about?
So the biggest challenge that we face is about how to create a high-performing and engaged and a thriving workplace. So the problem is that when teams try to build high-performing teams, they make some mistakes. So they assume that their organization is homogenous and that their people are motivated by the same things. Often organizations are actually using traditional and outdated management practices. So things like annual strategy rollouts or the 6 monthly performance reviews. Organizations also don't tie their strategy to an individual's daily activities and experience, and they often make decisions based on anecdotal data and gut feel. So at PentaQuest, we use a behavioral gamification approach, and we work with some of the biggest and most innovative companies in the world to help them get the most out of their people. So the way that we kind of tackle this challenge is that we use a behavioral assessment tool that uncovers the dominant motivations and engagement styles of the team or the organization. And then what we do is we use this data to help tailor the game mechanics and inform the types of behaviors that we're incentivizing. And that really helps us customize and configure the experience to the client organization, and make sure that we measure this on an ongoing basis, so that the gamification experience actually evolves as the business grows and changes as well. And so from tackling this challenge in that way, we've had some really fantastic results for our clients. Regular engagement, a huge increase in activities, non-mandatory L&D, as well as employee well-being and things like that. Is there
any concrete example, because I know there's a lot of NDAs in our industry, but is there any concrete example that you would like to share with us about results that you've gotten using these strategies?
Yeah, so like you said, NDAs, especially when we're looking at inside the workplaces, are quite common. But one of the examples is with an Australian government department here. We worked with them last year and continuing to work with them this year as well. An example of that is from the gamification experience. We had 71% regular ongoing engagement. We had 140% increase in non-mandatory L&D activities. So it wasn't just the mandatory, but it was actually above and beyond. We also had a 33% increase in employee well-being in just 4 weeks. So that was increased awareness and active, like being active in doing well-being activities.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. I mean, see that they're just to see that the fantastic things that can happen that are available out there if we use the right strategies in gamification is always freshening to the spirit, so to speak, when you hear all of these fantastic stories of things going on. So, Kerstin, we've heard a couple of examples of the things that you've been doing, but I would like to take out a little bit more of the general idea. Is there any process or a set of steps that you do when you are creating a gamification strategy, or how do you come about when a project comes in? How do you approach it? What are your steps? What's the process? Can you get us a little bit into your process?
Yeah, absolutely. So at PentaQuest, we have a 5-step gamification methodology, and it's based in human-centered and user-centered design principles that I'm sure a lot of our listeners will be familiar with. We also very strongly base what we do on psychology and looking at behavioral sciences as well. So, but I'll run you through the 5 steps. So the first is about clarifying the intent. So being really clear about what success looks like for the individual, for the team, for the business, and the people that you're serving. And it might sound straightforward, but we found that often, clients will come, we'll say, hey, PentaQuest, can you come in and solve this problem for it? And then for us, and then as we work through the process, we actually find that there might be multiple problems, or there might be actually a problem they didn't realize they had. So the very first step is being really clear about what is the problem that they're trying to solve, and what does success look like. The second step is explore, and this is about really understanding the current experience. So who are our users, and what do we want them to learn? What do we want them to do? What's motivating them currently? Where are people struggling in this context? What is their job to be done? And how do they like to be recognized and rewarded? So this explore step is really quite important. We as much as we can, we insist that we go out there, we speak to users, and we really engage them in the process. So once we've done intent, once we've done explore, the third step is a make, test, learn phase. So this is about generating an idea or a concept that is rough, and then testing it with people. So you need to show the designs as they change, and have the courage to ask for honest feedback from your users regularly. So this process can take a couple of days, a couple of weeks, or it can take many months. So it's really taking that iterative design approach and building it up and validating it and refining it with as much user feedback as you can get. Once you've got that, whether that be paper or a digital experience, it's ready to launch. Step 4 is about launching it. So again, this is about preparing people. Hey, there's this new exciting thing that's coming. Here's why we're doing it. Here's what's expected of you, and also about building excitement around it. And so this is really an opportunity to be a little bit creative, like what's something fun you can do to build intrigue and excitement around your concept. And then once it's out there, step 5 is about evolve. So it's about measuring it, evaluating it once it's out there, and then improving it and adding on new features. So very often when we work with clients, the evolve phase will be after a 3, 6, 12-month pilot, continually monitoring it, and then improving it, and then rolling it out even further. So 5 steps there, and just like any other design process, that can be done quite rapidly, or it can be done quite rigorously over a period of time. So it's a scalable methodology depending on the project and the challenge.
Yeah, I'm guessing that it depends on how large the challenge and the solution are. And of course, those 5 steps, and I'm going to recap very quickly. So I understand the intent that you mentioned, which is all about the objectives and measuring what the success look like. Then the second one started with an E, which I think is explore. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
so
that's
explore was understanding where they're at. I'm guessing also that the motivation of the players or the users that are going to be involved is something that you take a look at in there. Then is the third phase, which basically has 3 steps, right? 3 different things, which is about the creation, the actually showing it to the user, testing it, and iterating back and going back and forth with all these things. Then, of course, is the launch, because after you create all these things, whatever the result is, you have to launch it. And then, of course, you have to revisit that experience because things can be improved, evolved. And, there's just like in any game, games are sometimes they're increasing or they're creating new levels because people who are mastering the game also want to keep on enjoying the game. And you have to create that next level or that whatever is coming up next for that project. Did I get it kind of right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good summary.
Fantastic. Just a quick break before we continue. Are you enjoying this podcast? If you're listening through a podcasting app, please subscribe and rate us on the app. This will be of great help to reach more engagers so we can change the world together through gamification. Kerstin, now we would like to move into these sort of different questions in the sense that these questions are not so much about the story, but more about your experience and what do you think about these things. And the first one is if there is something that you would perhaps call a best practice or something that you think almost any gamification project could benefit from. Is there such a thing for you?
It's a good question. So the first, I suppose, that's really beneficial is having an in-depth understanding of psychology, and whether that's formal qualification or even as simple as keeping up with the latest research into human behavior. Because at the end of the day, we're tapping into motivation and we're trying to create a better learning experience or change behavior. So keeping up to date with that research is really important. And then the other thing is about measurement and ROI. And I know this can be difficult for us as gamification designers because we're focused on experiences, which are a lot more qualitative. But I think because of that, it's even more important for us to capture the impact that we're creating through gamification.
Absolutely, and that's actually precisely related to the first step of your process, which is the intent and where you have to measure what does success look like, because otherwise you might have had success or not, but you'll never know if you didn't have something to measure it against.
Exactly.
So, Kerstin, what would you say is your favorite game?
This is a really hard question.
Oh, yes.
Let's say my current favorite game is Dungeons and Dragons.
Wow. No, a complete classic from the RPG world. So there you go, Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of that. Been playing that for about 3 or 4 years. I play a couple of characters, but my main character is a half orc called Orlando Bloom.
So I'm guessing it's half orc and half elf.
Half. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and he's not very bright, but he's very strong.
Kerstin, after the while that we've spent together and all these questions that you've had, is there anybody that comes to your mind that you would like to listen to in an interview like this one in Professor Game?
Yeah, I would love to hear from Marigo Raftopoulos. I really admire her work and think she's got a really interesting take on gamification. So I'd love to hear from her.
Definitely. In fact, I think she was one of the early people that we interviewed, but I'm sure that there's many things that have changed and evolved in her thinking. So it would be very interesting to have her back. Definitely. I completely agree with that. So in that same sense of recommendations, if you had to recommend one book to the engagers, to this audience, what would that book be and why?
You asked some really great and some really tough questions, Rob. One book that I think is quite good is The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath. Some of the audience may be familiar with this one already, but I think it's got some really great insights into how do you create peak moments and what goes into creating an experience that stays with you and one that's memorable. And really, at the end of the day, this is part of what we want to create for our users of gamification. So, The Power of Moments is a really great book.
Yes, I was introduced to that book thanks to Monica Cornetti before the conference Gamicon. I don't know if you had that same experience.
I'd actually read it before that, but I loved that was the theme. And so, yeah, completely agree. Highly recommend that.
Very good book. Absolutely. And it's not directly related to gamification, but as you were mentioning, it is very important if you are going to create these type of moments of experiences. I do think that the power of moments, as the title says, is something that is super, super important for us to take into account. And Kerstin, what would you say in your experience and what you do in gamification, what would you say is your superpower or your sweet spot?
I think what I've found as I work with more and more clients is that I have a good ability for turning the often fuzzy intent of the client into something that's actionable and gamifiable. So that would be my supervisor, taking the intangible and making it tangible.
That's a superpower for sure. It's almost like a magician. You have something that is not there and it suddenly comes out.
Yeah.
So, Kerstin, we have arrived to our gamified random question, and this question comes from our audience. I know which questions are available, but I don't know which one is going to come up. So I'm going to go to the list, and a random number is going to come up, and I'm going to read the question just as it is to you. Of course, these questions make sense for you and for the show. So this question comes from Remco. Remco's asking, how do you start it, I'm guessing gamification, as a side hustle? Still having to pay the bills with my current job, and how do you develop it into a real job? I think you're very qualified for this one. He says, I am interested to see how you got where you are now. So that sounds like a very interesting question and very relevant to what you're doing. So Kerstin, take it away.
Yeah, well, it is a very relevant question because that's how I started. So before I officially, quit my job to do PentaQuest full time, I was working full time and doing gamification on the side. So a couple of things, I suppose. I was just so passionate and so curious about gamification and its potential that I couldn't not do it. So I started doing my Ph.D. part-time, and then I was also just spending weekends and evenings working on gamification, designing experiences and so forth. And I did that probably for about 2 years before then I went, you know what, I have enough demand from clients to leave my job and start the business. So I guess my advice would be do it, get out there, get clients, get reputation, get experience until you can make it work.
Absolutely. And getting a bit deeper into the woods, is there any advice? Because as you were mentioning, this is exactly what you did. I didn't know this in advance, by the way. You were mentioning that this is how you started, but how? I mean, you were working in whatever else you were working, which could be from gardening to, I don't know, the NASA for going into outer space. It's not really relevant. But how did you go about? Of course, you learned a lot. You went. I'm guessing you had some books, some courses, and so on. And how did you go about getting your first clients? Like, what was that first experience of getting a client to do something for gamification?
Yeah. So the very first gamification experience that I designed was actually for my colleagues at my workplace at the time. So me and another my colleague of mine went, okay, how do we solve this problem that we have in the workplace, which is how do we keep the office clean? Common problem, and we just thought, we don't want to do the whole passive aggressive, your mother doesn't work here, or clean up after yourself. Let's do this in a playful way. And so that very first experience was actually for my colleagues. So I just did it. I spent some time on the weekends or whatever, and built up this experience for my colleagues, and we started seeing some really great results. And so we built it up over a couple of months, and so we would actually have this big leaderboard with badges and mess monsters and all these different colorful like pen and paper type artifacts up on the wall. And I started telling people, sharing my passion for gamification, and we would actually have clients walk past and say, oh my goodness, what is this colorful wall that I see? We need some of that. Can you come and do that for us? And so that's really where it started. Just someone walking past and going, holy moly, this is really cool. Come and do that for us.
Interesting. That's almost a serendipity kind of stumbling into gamification. Very exciting. So Kerstin, I'm going to take the chance that today's interview has been a little bit shorter on time to ask you a question that I get to ask every once in a while, and is, what do you see in your future in gamification? What do you see? What's exciting for you? What gets you lighted up when you think about gamification these days?
Well, a lot. I mean, every day I'm just so grateful to be able to do what I do for a living. So I get really excited by a whole range of different clients and challenges that gamification can be solving. So one potential client that we're working with at the moment is looking at how to reduce worker injuries in like a warehouse situation. So they're having people getting injured from lifting heavy items incorrectly, and so we're working with them on how to use gamification to prevent that. So that's really exciting, a really exciting challenge, also a really worthy cause. So that's a current exciting thing. Sort of more future looking, gamification has been around, but I really feel like we're getting into a second or a third or whatever wave of gamification. So I feel like we as an industry are about to crack the nut on really taking it to the next level. So I'm really excited to see what other gamification designers are doing, and really as an industry really getting to that next level of sophistication.
I have to completely concur, and I agree with that, because I think that one of the good things that there was a hype and it's gone, and I would say that that's a good thing, that it's finally gone, and that all these people in their bios saying that they're gamification experts are now saying that they are AI experts and VR experts and whatsoever. And that's all cool, because now the people that are doing this are not doing this because of the hype. They're doing this because they have a commitment to the industry and what we're capable of achieving. And I think it's a fantastic moment to be in gamification in that sense. And I think that if we manage to endure this, and I think somebody was saying that gamification is dead and so on, I have to completely disagree, because everybody that I meet, and I meet quite a few people for the podcast, I haven't found the first one that in private or public conversation says that business is not going well. So that probably means that this is only growing. I mean, again, not necessarily from a formal perspective, but if you see the whole market and so on, I think it is completely growing, and people are understanding better what do we mean when we say gamification, and that only can be a good thing for the industry and for the people who are dedicated to this. So I completely agree, Kerstin. Before we finish this interview, of course, I would like to know if you have any final piece of advice that you would like to leave the engagers with. And of course, where can we find you, where we can find more about your work, where we can find you maybe on social media, where can we ask you any further questions? And then, of course, we'll say it's game over.
Yeah, sure. So on the advice question, I think, I'd highly encourage people to give gamification a try if they haven't done it before, but also to learn from many of the great resources, the gamification academics and the practitioners out there. I really hate to see when people try gamification without proper process or guidance, because if it doesn't go to plan, that's when people can sometimes say, oh, gamification doesn't work, when really it was that their design didn't work. And I think even though, like we just said, the industry's really maturing and really coming into its own, and I love for people to try bits of gamification and just really encourage everyone to have a go, but also do it in an informed way, because you can learn from other people's experiences and theories and mistakes, because we've been around long enough. So I really recommend that people look at the resources that are out there, because at the end of the day, we're designing a process for. We're designing an engaging experience for our people, and we're trying to design an experience that creates joy, and this is a really beautiful thing. So get out there, try it, and just do it in an informed way. Absolutely.
Kerstin, where can we find you on the internet? Because I'm sure many people will be interested in talking to you after our chat today.
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook as well. I just sort of have that more for personal connections, but definitely LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. You can find PentaQuest online and get in contact that way as well.
Fantastic. So if anybody wants to connect, we will have all these things on the show notes as well. You just go to professorgame.com, type on the search bar, you type Kerstin, Kerstin, and you'll find everything about Kerstin Oberprieler, at least the information that we have available. So thank you again very much for spending this time today. I know the time zone differences are a challenge, and we managed to do it today. Today is in the morning here in Spain, and it's in the afternoon for you in Australia. Is that right?
Yeah, it's the evening time. Yeah.
So there you go. That's how we managed to get this together. Thank you again for spending this time together with the engagers. But now it's time to say that it's game over.
Lovely. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, engagers, thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast. And if you want more interviews with incredible guests like Kerstin, then go to professorgame.com/subscribe and get started into our email list. That way, we can be in contact and you will be the first to know of any opportunities that Professor Game might have for you. And before you go on to your next mission, would you like to know what EI Games and Kevin Allen are up to? Then subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.